Hello, welcome to the School of Kindness. I'm John Andrews. I don't want to say very much by way of introduction to me. The film is not about me, it's just a general introduction about the School of Kindness. A couple of things that is probably worth pointing out about me is that for the last 10 years I've been working mostly as a writer and political activist, committed to bringing about constitutional change. There isn't much else to say about me, but I think two pieces of personal information that are particularly relevant to this project is firstly funding. It's always very important to know how individuals and organisations are funded. In my case, that's very easy to describe. I live on two small pensions. I'm also blessed with a wonderful wife who supports my work. We're fortunate enough to own our own home, and we have a very modest lifestyle with few expenses, and that's about it. Although I sometimes do a bit of wage slavery, as far as my political work is concerned, I work for no one. I have no bosses of any kind. The second piece of relevant information is about my qualifications. What qualifications do I have to do what I'm doing? In a word, none. Although I had a pretty good basic education and was once a medical student, very little of my formal schooling is relevant to what I do now. Mostly that's simply because there isn't a university anywhere in the world that I know of that does the work of the School of Kindness. So does that mean I can't possibly know what I'm talking about? Well, that's something you'll have to judge for yourself. But before you make that decision, just consider the fact that I have in the house dozens of fine, very important books. And for each of those very fine and important books, I must have read dozens and dozens of essays based on the main subjects which are relevant to the School of Kindness, which is mostly politics, economics, history, media studies, that sort of thing. In other words, I've read an awful lot. That's about all there is to say on the qualifications. I think I know what I'm talking about. You'll need to form an opinion of your own self. There's a little bit more about me, and if anybody's interested enough, on our website, freedemocrats.co.uk. But let's just get on with the main business at hand, which is today just a general introduction to the School of Kindness. In this opening session, I'll talk about the main purpose of the School of Kindness programme and a couple of vitally important concepts that are fundamental to it, such as trust and kindness. 100 years ago this year, one of the greatest man-made abominations of all time began. Known as the First World War, it brought into sharp focus something that's as old as human history itself: the limitless capacity of human beings to inflict unbelievable cruelty. In that outrageous Holocaust, millions of people were slaughtered needlessly. The young people who killed and were killed in return did not do so because they had any personal grievances against those they were told to kill, and no good reason to do what they did. They did it because they were lied to and betrayed by their own trusted leaders. They were told they were fighting the war to end all wars. It was a lie. To say that those great trusted leaders knew at the time they were lying to those who trusted them is not itself a lie or an hysterical overreaction. It's a matter of historical record. Lloyd George, for example, the British Prime Minister at the time, said this as the slaughter raged on: "If people really knew, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course they don't know and can't know. Newspaper correspondents don't write, and the censorship would not pass the truth." Once it was all too late, people did start to realise they'd been betrayed by their own trusted leaders. The war poet Wilfred Owen, for example, who was himself killed shortly before the war ended, wrote this: "My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie. Dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori, which means roughly it's sweet and honourable to die for your country. So Owen obviously knew the truth, because he recognised that the claim that it's a good thing to die for your country is an outright lie, and an old lie at that. Annie Soles also realised the truth. Annie Soles was a woman who had 5 sons. Every one of them was killed in that senseless abomination. After it was all over, and for the rest of her life, Annie Soles refused to stand whenever the national anthem was played, which was a highly unusual thing to do in those days. She learned the truth the hard way. The war to end all wars. If it wasn't so awfully tragic, it would be funny. That was just one of the multitude of despicable lies told to the youngsters sent to kill and be killed 100 years ago, and to their loving families who supported them. Because, of course, war did not end, and if today's great trusted leaders have their way, it never will end. I'll discuss the reasons for this in future recordings. For now, I just want to mention it because it provides one of the most obviously provable facts that underpins my work. The great trusted leaders of 100 years ago lied on a massive scale, and they're still lying today on an equally massive scale. Our trusted leaders cannot be trusted, not any of them, ever. This is a vitally important truth to grasp. This isn't to say that some leaders are honourable people. Of course, some of them are. But the general truth is, without doubt, that we cannot trust them. Many people would be justifiably doubtful about that claim, to say the least. After all, it's deeply unsettling, because it turns the world as we know it on its head. It exposes the hard fact that those we think of as great and wonderful figures, who we should aspire to be, the 1%, are, at the very best, no more than grasping opportunists, liars, and brazen con artists, and at their worst, unbelievably evil monsters. And it exposes the fact that those we're conditioned to ignore, and sometimes hate and despise, ordinary working people, are in fact the true heroes of humanity. You'll see that once this truth is clearly understood, everything suddenly becomes crystal clear, and you'll wonder why you never saw it before. And far from being something to fear, you'll suddenly grasp the pure beauty of this reality. The way ahead to real global justice suddenly appears in dazzling daylight. This is the vital truth to understand, and in future recordings I'll prove it over and over again. But for now, as this recording is just a general introduction, I'll tell just one very interesting story, a story that deserves considerable reflection. During the Second World War, Winston Churchill established a very small, very elite, very secret group of men. It was called the LCS, the London Controlling Section. And it had just one purpose, to plan the colossal deception strategy that would be used to precede the Allied invasion of France. Initially, one might suppose that if a group of people were being handpicked to plan a massive operation wholly founded on lies, deceit, and cunning, the particular skill set required would probably best be found in British jails, amongst the criminal fraternity, bank robbers, smugglers, fraudsters, conmen, and the like. But no, not a bit of it. The people selected to plan the biggest deception in British history were carefully chosen from the very highest echelons of British aristocracy. The journalist and historian Anthony Cave Brown wrote the following. The men of LCS were, of course, of several minds, but they appeared to be united by a single factor, class. Deception, like intelligence, was the pursuit of gentlemen. Colonel Bevan, the chief of the LCS, was a son-in-law of the Earl of Lucan and a grandson of the founder of Barclays Bank. Bevan's deputy and the author of Plan Jail, codename for the deception plan, was Colonel Sir Ronald Evelyn Leslie Wingate, the son of Wingate Pasha of the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, and a cousin of both Lawrence of Arabia and Wingate of Burma. The other members of the LCS included financiers, politicians, diplomats, and above them all was Churchill himself. Churchill was, of course, born at Blenheim Palace, grandson to the Duke of Marlborough. These men were chosen for their long and well-established pedigrees in the ancient skills of duplicity. Britain's experience in their use of lies and deception was longer than that of any other power. For over 500 years, her statesmen and generals had used it to establish first a kingdom and then an empire. The good men of the LCS chose for their inspiration the words of one of their noble predecessors, Sir Garnet Wolseley, a former Commander-in-Chief of the British Army. His thoughts, written in 1869, were inscribed on a wooden plaque fixed to the wall of their meeting place, and read, "We are bred up to feel it a disgrace, ever to succeed by falsehood. We will keep hammering along with the conviction that honesty is the best policy, and that truth always wins in the long run. These pretty little sentiments do well for a child's copybook, but a man who acts on them had better sheath his sword forever." Those words are worth considerable reflection, for a number of reasons. For we are indeed bred up from the cradle to value pretty little sentiments, such as honesty. Normal people call it morality and prize it highly. But which of us is bred up to understand the cynical reality that General Wolseley understood so well? And when are they so bred? And why? How? And by whom? Although Anthony Cave Brown's book, Bodyguard of Lies, which is this fantastic read, although it deals specifically with the Second World War, and it was the first book I ever read over 30 years ago that's on this particular subject and began to open my eyes about how our world really works. The title comes from a quotation by Churchill, who once said, "In wartime, truth is so precious, she must always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." This too is worth considerable reflection, because Britain has been at war throughout nearly all of its history, as it still is today. Therefore, according to Churchill, once voted the greatest Briton in history, because our country is permanently at war, it must be perfectly acceptable to permanently lie to the people, to protect truth, or, in today's better-known jargon, in the national interest. No doubt many people would argue that such routine deceit by our trusted leaders is the very stuff we need and absolutely must have to ensure our survival, and that without it, we should fall victim to the deceit of others. That is one view. But another view might suggest that it guarantees our continued enslavement and prevents our ultimate liberation. Many would argue that if it were not for people like Churchill and his LCS, Britain would have been lost to Hitler. But others could counter that if it were not for people like them, we might have been liberated by the examples of the American and French revolutions, and Hitler may never have happened at all. Indeed, if Europe had never been blighted by the earlier variations of Churchill and his LCS, it would have evolved very differently, and most probably neither Napoleon nor Hitler would have emerged, and neither of the world wars would ever have happened. Given the mountain of evidence that proves that lying by governments is completely routine, and always has been, it's very clear to see that one of the core pillars of the school of kindness, that our trusted leaders cannot be trusted, is wholly justified. Some people might wonder why I do what I do. Well, when I see young people today, my heart goes out to them. Their generation is in trouble, big trouble. I don't know a single thinking adult of my age or older who feels very differently. None of us wishes we were young again. The reason for the trouble that young people are in is not due to evil foreign terrorists or because of malicious foreign immigrants flooding our homeland to nick our jobs and sponge our benefits, which is what our trusted media continually tell us. The reason for the deep trouble the young are in is because of our own trusted leaders. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, life here in Britain was pretty good, and opportunities were plentiful. Young people could leave school and walk straight into any number of jobs, try them for a while and walk straight out again, and then straight into another one. The new public health service was working well, public housing was plentiful, and you could get a university education for free. There was something approaching envy in older people's eyes. Many of them had endured real hardships when they were young, and they would see the good times the young were enjoying and tell them they didn't know they were born. They were absolutely right. My mom, who, like my dad, had been forced to leave school on her 14th birthday to start earning a living, would sometimes say she wished she had had the chances when she was a girl that I had. In other words, when I was a young person, society was a lot easier, gentler, kinder, safer, fun. Old people envied us and marvelled at the wondrous future that surely lay ahead of us. I tell this story to show that things have not always been as they are now. The life of grim austerity we're being forced to endure is not necessary. There are alternatives. People are suffering today not because they need to, but because it pleases our great trusted leaders that they do so. To many, that will seem a preposterous allegation, but I will prove it. Today, the situation of my youth has completely reversed. People of my generation thank our lucky stars for the good times we were fortunate enough to live through and enjoy. Then we look at young people and tremble with real fear for their future. A recent report from the Prince's Trust revealed that young unemployed people in Britain today have feelings of such helplessness that about a third of them have contemplated suicide. 1 in 3 young people who have been unemployed for 6 months or more have thought about killing themselves. This is the society our great trusted leaders have created and are making even worse day by day. This is their no alternative society. So when I say I have real fear for the future of young people, I am not overreacting. Even the Prince's Trust agrees with me. This is an outrageous and completely unacceptable situation. And with the fear I have for the future of young people, I also feel real rage and anger that this state of affairs not only exists, but has been deliberately created by the very people we trust to look after us. Just 1 generation ago, life was pretty good. Now it's not. It's completely reversed, and it's getting worse. The appalling social conditions of the Industrial Revolution are beckoning once again. Here in Britain, for example, one of the richest countries in the world, we now have the obscenity of food banks. This is how our own trusted leaders treat us. So this is why I do what I do. I cannot look into the eyes of young people and not try to do something. One other interesting thing about that report is that I came upon it by chance on the BBC's News 24 channel, which maybe only 1 in 1,000 people ever look at, if that. The headlines of the BBC's main 6 o'clock news, which far more people see, never mentioned the Prince's Trust report. The headlines told us instead about some bad weather that was expected, that rail fares were going to rise, and about some complete irrelevance concerning Nigella Lawson that I've already forgotten the details of. The fact that 1 in 3 unemployed young people in Britain have contemplated suicide was deemed by the BBC to be too trivial to deserve a place in the headlines along with Nigella Lawson. I shall discuss this type of thing in far more detail in a future recording, when I deal with our trusted media. So one of the main purposes of the School of Kindness is to try to alert people to what's really going on, especially young people. To try to show people how the world really works and to show how we can change it. Things don't have to be the way they are. Ordinary people, beguiled by trusted leaders, are busily constructing the cruel and the heartless society we have to endure at the moment, and ordinary people can stop them and build a new one based on our natural kindness and humanity. The future doesn't have to be as bleak as it most certainly is at the moment. We can change it. We don't have to put up with the world our trusted leaders are creating, or, to be more accurate, destroying. So the main purpose of the School of Kindness is to help bring about the change, to help inspire young people to do the things that must be done, so that old guys like me never again have to look at the young and feel real fear for their futures. The School of Kindness is our attempt to help the young, to help them see that their future does not have to be as terrible as it most certainly is, providing they do something about it. Because if they don't, no one else will. Nothing I say in this recording or those that will follow is a lie. But I always encourage people to doubt anything they're told by anyone until such time as they have seen and weighed up the evidence for themselves. And the things I say should be treated with exactly the same circumspection. I will often refer to the sources of my information, and I always encourage people to read and find out for themselves. Don't just take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Read, read, read. Our website, shown at the beginning of this recording, has a fairly sizable resource centre listing dozens of fine books, great films, and hours of excellent music, as well as a few other websites which are invaluable for finding out what's really happening in the world. I've read all these books, seen all the films, and regularly listen to the inspirational music and follow the websites. Although I'm very sure of the information I give, I always encourage people to check for themselves. I'm just as capable of making an honest mistake as the next person. Let's move on now and consider that most vital word in our title, kindness.